Questions?
Um, so I've been spending, in the past years, I've been spending a lot of time trying to get rid of energy leaks and um, be more focused and um, paying attention to that sort of thing. Um, and I think I was thinking about it recently and realized like I don't ever get boredom. And I have a huge list of things I want to do or learn about or make or you know um, but I don't have enough time or energy to do everything, and so it seems a big issue is focus and well, not focus but direction, knowing what to focus on. And sometimes when I have a lot of things I want to do, I have trouble just focusing on a single thing, and I kind of get split. And so do you have any advice for that?
Sure, we could go into that, but let me ask you, how's your microphone? Is it jiggling around somewhere or moving somewhere? Or
No.
okay, maybe you could move a little closer to it. That might help, perhaps.
uh,
All right. So energy leaks. It's interesting the whole construct of energy in this work, but from what I know of your circumstance, the energy links that would be most important are the ones that are related to random thoughts about nothing important or nothing that matters or nothing that leads anywhere. And
mhm.
so folks get in all kinds of, like, they get their minds all twisted up in knots over something that really has no yield or merit. And so that'd be the first place to stop. Random thoughts about random things for no good reason. So how are things in that department?
um in general, pretty good. I think where I don't know is when I'm not sure if there's any yield or merit to them. Say like regarding work, there might be like an area of work that I get caught up in, and maybe it's like it's hard to tell if there's going to be any yield or not in it.
Without getting personal, can you give an example?
Um, sure. So I've been following LLMs and that area of work recently, and so spending a lot of time thinking about applications for them, and sometimes I'll get into very specific applications and think through.
Well, that has yield, right? Almost by definition, you're thinking about the latest tech and applications of the latest tech. That would definitely have yield for you in this world. So that's
Yeah.
not the issue.
But not if somebody else. If what if somebody else is doing it already?
Well, you
Is
need to
there
find
still
that
yield?
out, right? And finding that out is not also not has yield.
Right.
Okay, so that can't be it. You mentioned energy leaks. That's necessary for work. You get paid to do that, right?
Yeah.
That's how you pay for your bread and butter. If you were a hunter gatherer, that would be hunting and gathering. So now, where do you think the leaks are?
I'm not sure. Um,
Well, I don't want to generalize and just say general things that are not useful. Maybe we can come back to that later, and they'll come to you.
sure.
Okay.
Because I think there were some in the past that I knew I had, but I feel like those.
Do you want to describe some of those for the benefit of the
Yeah.
audience?
Um, yeah. I think there were a lot of like social ones where I feel like I don't know. In my 20s, like all my friends are always going out and drinking and stuff, and I feel compelled to go, and um, chasing women as well, and not knowing
Well,
what
chasing women
exactly I
can have a
want.
yield,
That too.
but at
But
your
I think
age, chasing women can have yield, and it may make sense.
right.
May make sense. But
Right. So let me specify: chasing women when I don't know what I want.
okay, good, all right,
I think
good.
that was a source of leaks, and then once I figured out what I wanted, then it was kind of shut that down.
Lust can be a real. I'm not saying that you were lustful, but let's just talk about lust in general. That can be a huge energy leak, and porn even more so. And yeah, and the reason it matters is because you need that energy for other things. And one of the ways you know that it's a massive leak is from tantra, right? They prescribe tantric exercises, which are precisely marshaling that energy and using that energy for the sake of enlightenment. And we won't go into details of those tantric exercises, but they use the sexual energy. And so this notion of losing energy, just for the general audience, is we waste so much time and energy on things that have no, they don't accumulate any value. And it's not because we're moralists necessarily, although some people might be, but excessive moralism can also be an energy leak or energy drain or energy dissipation. There's, you can say this in many different ways. But the reason it's important is because that energy is instead used and focused for conscious development. And believe it or not, it works. It definitely works. So we guard against wasting energy. Well, let's keep going, and I bet things will come up as we go along.
Yeah, no, they are. On that point, unless, I mean, given that, we're in an animal body, can it also be a leak if you, like, try to, suppress it or something? Like, how is...
Well, this is where age is actually important. And age is and this is why recommendations can't be general. So the recommendations for a 40-year-old man are different than that of a 20-year-old man, which are different than that of a 40 or 60-year-old man. So for men, I'm speaking of men now, I don't think women have the same degree of problem as men do for biological reasons.
Right.
And then everybody else, I don't know where they fit. I'm sorry, what was the question?
Well, so I wanted to comment on, you said lust was a big energy leak, and that energy, and I think, did you say porn was an energy leak?
Yeah, porn is destructive in many ways. And one
Right.
of them is that you leak energy all over the place.
Right. So when I paid attention to this, I noticed if I abstained from sex or masturbating, then there is an accumulation of energy, but then it also, like, gets overwhelming in a way, and then I can't focus on anything.
Again, it depends on the age, and you're a young man, and so I'm not surprised.
Right. And so
It
then
gets
is
easier
it
as you
just
get
like...
older, but it's always, it's part of being male.
And so is it the goal there just to, like, strike a balance?
It depends on the person, and it depends on what their aim is, right? If they want to get enlightened, for example, if they want to wake up, then yeah, definitely they have to get all of that harmonized and balanced. Or set it aside for a while. Something like that. But again, it's not, there's nothing too rigid about any of this. The way
Right.
is not rigid.
Right.
But where one can really waste energy is with lies. You hear a lie, and your mind incorporates it, and then you're working from a lie. And that lie could be about anything. It can be gossip, it can be politics, it can be something scientific, and once you start working with a lie, then you're not working. You're so far away from the way that you're dissipating all of that energy. It's of no it has no good, and it takes from the good.
Mm.
And so this is why guard your mind is kind of a byline of this channel, because
Right.
if you don't guard your mind, you'll unknowingly assimilate a lie or a series of lies, and then you can't get them out of your easily get them out of your conscious mind and then your implicit mind. So lies are a real problem. Another question?
Another comment. Another one that from the mind is Twitter or X.
Speak clearly. Speak clearly, please.
Can you hear me?
Okay, that's better now. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Another energy leak that comes to mind is like social media, and in my case, I only use Twitter and Instagram. And Twitter, it's to keep up with, tech news and that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
But then inevitably, their algorithm shows me all kinds of weird things, and I try to control it by like blocking, certain accounts that post that sort of thing. But
right, and you can also, there's a little drop down where you could say, I want to see less of this.
Yeah.
And so it's very important that you collate. It's very important that you curate your timeline.
Yeah. So right now, YouTube is the best for that. Except they keep trying to show me shorts, and then you say stop showing me that, and they only suppress it for 30 days.
Oh, really? The shorts?
And then yeah, and then they show it to you again after. But
that sounds very useful.
Twitter.
I'll probably ask you about that later. But what I wanted to say that I learned something yesterday, that these images of violence that pop up a lot more frequently than you would like to on X. Apparently, there are bots that are doing this specifically to make us go crazy, to sow division and to create chaos in the minds of Americans. And so that's another reason why you must constantly be on guard. There are literally agents whose job it is to drive us insane. And they send, and this is true on Instagram too, and I'm sure TikTok. So psychological warfare is reached its natural culmination. And so just as we have through the years, Americans have sowed chaos and division in countries that we want to conquer, that chicken has come home to roost. And so it's being applied onto Americans, and it's very clear. And the other thing is, it's not just social media. Media itself is been co-opted, or if it ever was free, I don't know, it's hard to say now, and I'm an old man, but it clearly used for psychological operations by the powers at large in America and Canada, at least. And of course, Europe, there's no semblance of free speech. And the problem with that, of course, is that then we go to war, and the people have nothing to say to try and stop it. Okay, so another question? Or are we still on that?
Just a comment on that. I noticed I went to see a movie, I don't know, a month or two ago.
Mm-hmm.
And
which movie?
How they showed. It was Dune 2.
Dune 2.
Yeah.
I hear that's good or bad depending on who I speak to. How is it?
It's visually good.
Okay. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's true. Okay, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Anyway, I don't know. I almost slept through it, but my point I was making was the previews, like the ad previews of the movies at the beginning. Every single one of them was about the destruction of the world, and like these superhero movies or Godzilla.
Right. And so if you're bathed in post-apocalyptic or apocalyptic imagery, then of course that's going to create despair, especially in young people, especially if it's a blanket saturation. But that's exactly what's happening, and one must wonder why. And so it goes. The world has never been a nice place, at least if you're living in a civilization. It's not designed to work. But when you're in the middle of psychological warfare, it's particularly unpleasant.
Right.
But it could be that the
And
psychological warfare is trying to prevent something else, but I doubt it, frankly.
right.
Go ahead.
So what does one do to protect themselves? Because I mean, obviously, one option is just to go out in the woods and live off the grid and not be exposed to that sort of thing. But that seems
You go off the
not.
grid. You go off the grid in the wrong way, or in any way, and they'll come after you. They don't like you off the grid anymore.
Mhm.
I mean, it's suspicious, right?
Right.
And that's not really any protection. I think it better is to learn the skills of managing your information input. That's vitally important now. And if you can't, different people are different. Some people should just stay away from it altogether. Other people can take low doses. Other people are prepared to go in and do, combat with. So there's a wide range of different people, and these people also have different aims in life, right? So it all depends on the purpose. I mean, the person, the time, the situation, the circumstances, and the goal, the motive. But it's dangerous out there.
Mhm.
I don't want to sound too, crazy old manish. It may be too late for that. But the thing is, it really is dangerous. I had a guest over here with a young daughter, and she was watching cartoons, and I was shocked. I mean, the indoctrination and the inculcation of these belief systems starts very, very, very young. And so parents must definitely be on guard. But who knows what comes next? So, But they're not just selling cereal; they're selling ideology.
Mm.
But they've always done that. So this is again where the lies come in, where to live a life on lies is very unfortunate, and one must actively pursue truth and eschew lies in order to flourish in this world. Now, some people are protected by nature of their circumstance, right? They don't have hours to spend on social media,
Right.
or the movies, or the television, or whatever. So they're somewhat protected. And other people voluntarily give these up because they find them unpleasant. I think the best index probably is to see how you feel, and if you feel, after 15 minutes on social media, you probably do less. I mean, you shouldn't do things that make you feel bad, but people do all the time.
Right.
Okay, sir?
In one of your previous videos, you said that you were trying to um, tell people to prepare themselves for what's to come.
Right.
Can you expand on that? What do you mean by that? First, what do you mean by what's to come, and then second, how to prepare yourself?
Okay, there's some things we know about the world. We know that whatever it is, it will change.
Mm-hmm.
There are several currents coming together at the same time. Of course, there's the governmental psychological operations on the people. There's the censorship, which doesn't allow for error correction, which is vitally important for a healthy society. If you can't correct your errors, then you just compound them. Mm-hmm. There's the militaristic, the out and out militaristic, declaration of war by proxy. there's the buildup of a huge industry for both military and psychological operations, including censorship. There's distortion and there's lies, and that's never a good thing. And from the Tao Te Ching, we learn that all things, it kind of reaches to a point, and then it peaks, and then it reverts to the source. All things revert to the source. Now, that's all I'm speaking of, is that it seems to me that we're reaching a place of the climax of I want to say climax of lies, the climax of greed, the climax of ignorance, the climax of temporal power, among people who are obsessed with that kind of thing. And so then what follows is something different. I don't think anyone knows what it will be. Will it be an AI? Will it be a pandemic? Will it be some people believe there's going to be some kind of climate catastrophe. Will it be a terrorism from within? Will it be a revolution? Who knows? But the thing is that now, as always, it's important to have provisions. And the most important provision is to know where the center is and to be able to return to it, so you can retreat and adjust, or retreat and replenish. So to return to the center is always good advice, but especially good advice during times of chaos, uncertainty, and disease. So that's kind of it. I mean, I could go on for a long time about it, but I don't want to add to the fear. And there's no reason for fear, but it's totally understandable why people would be fearful.
I got 2 follow-ups.
Okay, good.
The first one, how do you return to the center when there's a lot of distractions going on? Because it seems easy to do when things are relatively peaceful. It's, at least in my experience, but it's a lot more difficult if there's a lot of distractions and, say, like, the body is anxious.
Well, in The Secret of the Golden Flower, they speak of, let's see, do I have that here? In this book, they say when the body's unsettled, you settle it with the mind, and when the mind is unsettled, you settle it with the body, e.g. the breath. I mean, i.e. the breath. So breathing is oftentimes very useful. Just focus on the breath, especially the exhalation. Now, when thinking, it's good and nice to be able to get off the train of thought. And that automatically puts you closer to the center. So you have this stream of thoughts going by, a train of thoughts, let's call it, and you just don't get on. Now, using the metaphor of thoughts as clouds, instead of focusing on the clouds, you focus on the sky. Actually, you become the sky. And in this sky, clouds will pass by. You just don't get excited. Just stay in that wide open spaciousness of the Dharmakaya, the sky-like mind. But there's also other physical ways that people can return to a center and almost feel it physically. So you could operate from the hara, that space underneath the umbilicus, and that you can move from and breathe from and center yourself from, the way the Zen folks do in particular. And then you can so the center for each person is going to be somewhat, or how they get there will be somewhat different depending on their stage of development and their understanding and the metaphors they use, and the physiological or psychological mechanisms that they use in order to return to a place that feels secure and balanced. And I think in martial arts, have you ever studied any martial arts?
No.
I think there's a base, there's a stance that's the base, the center, the place where you move from this place of your feet are not close together, you're planted, you've got those pylons going into the ground, and you're just in a position where you have maximum flexibility to defend or to strike. But that's another kind of center, and so it's metaphorically it's kind of like that, except psychological and spiritually. So for some it might be they might get there with a mantra. Others might get there with breathing. Still others might return to you hear this in the introductory psychological literature about returning to a safe space in their past. That's
What does that mean?
Well, for me, anytime I hear anybody say safe space, right, I go right back to this time when I was a young teenager and I was surfing in the Gulf of Mexico, and the sun was rising on my back, and the waves were just lifting me up and down, and you have that wonderful smell and that beautiful air and the warmth of the sun on the water on your back. You got the long hair that's all wet. And it's just, for me, that's like, I'm just giving myself as an example. So that would be my what do they call it, a safe space, or what do they call it, your place of peace or quiet or whatever. So everybody should have one of those in reserve. And again, so if the breathing can't calm you down, and you can't slow your mind down, then you put it back into this visualization. And that may be the most that some people can do, or maybe need to do, depending on the circumstance. But when the world is going crazy, it's important you keep your head about you, and that takes practice and preparation. So if you want to keep your balance when things are unsettled, you have to have spent some time on the mat. Okay, does that make sense? And we can go on and on and on, but the center is the source. Now, for some religious folks, it could be, going to the heart of Jesus. It could be prayer. That could be incredibly powerful.
What is it about spending time on the mat?
Oh, that's just a martial arts metaphor.
I see.
Okay. We should probably stop, because that could go on for a long time. There's so many different ways, and everybody's different.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. I mean,
prayer and mantra, I think, are underestimated. They're used a lot and more in the Middle East and in the Near East, and the Catholics, I think, use. I remember when I was growing up that the old ladies would, there was a stressful situation, they go right to the Hail Marys, which is just a prayer and a mantra.
Can you say more about prayer?
That prayer is a huge topic. Could you ask a more specific question? Okay, here we go.
So, I mean, I grew up going to Catholic school, and I kind of, as a teenager, I just kind of threw it all out, right?
Can you try and enunciate a little bit? For some reason, it's coming across muddled.
Muddled?
Muddled. So, you grew up in Catholic school, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I went to Catholic school growing up, and as a teenager, I kind of just threw out the whole religion, as a lot of people did. Right. And so I feel like prayer got thrown out with that, and now I'm looking back and I'm thinking about prayer and wondering what the the effectiveness of it, and B, what is the right way to pray, if you should at all.
All right, good question. Broad question. Let me start with the broad, and maybe we can narrow it down. The broadest way to pray is with your life. You just make your life into a prayer. The dedication of intent, the dedication of intention, the aligning with the force, aligning with the way, aligning with the spirit, and making that the implicit ground of everything you do. So that's a very powerful prayer, the prayer of your life. Then there's prayers that are silent listening. But to do that, you have to have it cleared your mind, or having your mind cleared for you, right? And that can happen after, say, for example, a devastating loss or something traumatic in your life, and your mind just goes blank, and now it's open, and you could just listen. But you don't need that. I mean, I'm not saying you need the trauma or the devastating loss, but to pray with just an open mind, just listening or looking. Because God is always here and always speaking and always teaching and always evident. It's everywhere. Where could it not be, right? So that's another kind of prayer would be, so there's one prayer where you're looking, another prayer where you're listening, another prayer where you're speaking, say, a mantra, or you're speaking a prescribed prayer, the Hail Mary, the Our Fathers, do you remember these from Catholic school?
I don't remember them.
Some of these are beautiful prayers. The Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. That's a powerful prayer. So don't underestimate that. And then there's so those are some of the prayers. There's silent prayer. There's the prayer of learning, the prayer of dedication of one's life. There's simple mantras. There's returning to the source is a form of prayer. You're coming back home, or as close to home as you can get, to seek comfort, solace, and wisdom. Right. So there's as many kinds of prayers as there are people, and the form of prayer changes as one evolves. Right. But don't underestimate some of the prayers that you got in childhood, because those have stood the test of time and they've been used and they have a certain energy to them. So just like mantras, Om Tada Tutore Reso Ha has a totally different energy than Gatte, Paragate, Parasom Gatte, Bodhi So, right? Which is very different than Om Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum, Mani Padme Hum. And so you get to know these prayers and get to know them before you need them too much. And then there are some that just naturally resonate with a particular person and their life history and their circumstance. Right? I'm sure there's Indian prayers and Muslim prayers. Or you could recite the Quran. Or, those things are written almost as poem prayers.
Right.
Show me the straight path, not the path of those you have favored, not those who are led astray, for example, things like that. And the way it starts, the benevolent, the merciful, it's powerful stuff. So there's an endless. What makes something a prayer is your heart, not the externals. Is what I would have to say about prayer at this moment. But it's a huge subject. Is that okay for now?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's good.
We can drill down on any of those anytime you'd like. Okay. Mm-hmm. Question.
I had another follow up from the previous one. On the subject of the world being crazy and the lies and censorship and stuff.
The world of man is crazy. The world of man's mind is crazy. The world is not crazy. The world is exquisitely put together and operates flawlessly and seamlessly. You can't find a seam in this world. It's amazing.
So the world of man being crazy, is it any crazier than it's ever been?
Man's mind being crazy. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'm asking, is it any crazier than it's ever been? Because in my life, I grew up in Canada, and so I didn't have that indoctrination of the U.S. being the best country in the world, right? And I grew up after 9/11, and so I've always seen, I've been aware of government spying on its own people, for as long as I can remember. So that doesn't, and from my perspective, none of this is new, right? And then with history in the past, there's just been war after war. And so is there anything new, or is this just kind of like the state of the world?
I suppose the answer to that question would depend on where you're standing in the world. If you're Palestinian or Israeli right now, or Ukrainian, it would seem very new, right?
Mm.
But if you zoom out far enough, then no, this is the history of the world. What's different in my lifetime is the nuclear weapons, the opportunity to, or the possibility of annihilating humanity off the face of the earth effectively. And we can do that many times over, so that's new. The other thing that's new is the global communications. That's new. It used to be that there were, cultural pockets, different places, China, Europe, and the U.S., South America and Africa, but now it's global. And so, it's that question is it new? Does it ever change? Is completely, you can answer it according to taste, pretty much. What I love is Heraclitus and Parmenides. Heraclitus says everything changes always. You can't be in a river. A man cannot step into a river twice, because it's not the same man and it's not the same river. And there's a lot of truth in that. And then there's Parmenides, who says nothing changes. So Heraclitus says everything changes, and he's right. Parmenides says there's no change in the world. There can't be change. Everything is the eternal now. There's just this instant. And I've always loved the fact that these two great pre-Socratics say exactly the opposite things, and they're both correct. They're just at different levels of abstraction. So while we're here, let me just ask you about Zeno's arrow. Do you know about Zeno's arrow?
The paradox of
happening?
Yeah.
Can you explain it for everybody?
So it's if you think about an arrow flying from A to B, mathematically, then with time and space, it takes for the half the time to go halfway between A and B. It takes a certain amount, and then it takes another amount of time to go the next halfway, the next halfway, and halfway, and you can go halfway infinitely. And so, how does the arrow ever get to point B?
Okay, that's one version. There were many Zeno's paradoxes. Can I share one that I heard articulated recently? That we can agree that as that arrow's flying, let's use an archer and a target. It's more fun than mathematics. Okay, so the archer shoots the arrow. At any given instant, the arrow is in a place, correct? So at any given instance, we can say the arrow's not moving, it's in a particular location, like the instant 1, instant 2, instant 3, instant 4, instant 5, right?
Right.
So if the arrow at any given instant is in a single place, there's a collection of instances. None of those instances have any movement in them. So how could the arrow get to the target? Since you can add those instances forever, none of them include movement. All of this thing is actually quite mysterious, and the fun part is to go back and look at things like what we mean by force and momentum and movement and things like that, or time, and you find out that the whole thing just kind of starts to fall apart in your hands. It's fascinating. So, but there's nothing new about this. Parmenides and Heraclitus and all these great pre-Socratics and people before them played around with this stuff. It was just kind of fun, I thought. You can collect as many instances as you want. None of the instances have movement in them. Movement is not part of an instant. And if we go to Eckhart Tolle or Krishnamurti or those guys or whatever, they'll say there's only the eternal now. So that was just kind of fun. Okay. enough fun. Next question. Sorry, I like that stuff.
This one just came to mind. On the topic of generosity, how do you balance like practicing generosity but not getting like taken advantage of? And the one I'm like the case I'm thinking that came to mind is like the tipping culture, and how, it's tipping is a good way to practice generosity. You always tip, but then they start putting up, you know, asking for a tip at the convenience store where all they did was press a button, and these things are, they start asking for charity at the grocery store, and donate $5 here, donate, and then when you think about it, a lot of them are just trying to take advantage of people.
They're also manipulating you psychologically. I read somewhere a study that showed
Right.
that if you put that jar out there, then people don't notice the price that they just paid for their Tylenol. It minimizes the sting of having paid too much for something in the first place. So one educates oneself, and I wouldn't consider. I mean, tipping is one thing, but I the idea of tipping a machine, I'm just too much of an old man for that. I can't get there. I can't get to tipping a machine. But yeah, so I don't think that has anything to do with generosity. And I think those other jars, those ubiquitous jars, you got to remember those are also there to manipulate your mind. Right. There are scientific studies that show you can really get away with a lot more if people are thinking about the jar and whether they should give or not, when in fact they've just been taken. So, it has nothing whatsoever to do with charity. And so to educate yourself, again, this is where it's important to be in the modern world, and this is somewhat different. You have to defend yourself. Although the same thing's true in Morocco and the Medinas, right? You're going to have to defend yourself against the merchants if you're a tourist.
Right.
And so if you're going to be out in the world, you got to prepare yourself for the world. And the best way to prepare yourself is to know your mind and to go out with the mindset of protecting it, in my opinion. But I mean, do you feel that tipping a machine is tipping? I mean, they use the same word, but it's not tipping.
Well, it's when, say, you're at so I was at a food truck, and there's a tablet outside where you put in your order.
Mm-hmm.
And there's people inside the truck making the food, but you're not interacting with them. And then you tap on the screen to put your order in, and then at the end they ask you for a tip before you got your food, before you even interacted with the person. But in theory, there's the person inside.
Is there something they're offering that warrants a tip? I mean, is the service fast and good and the food's hot and correct? Or is it just there to try and extract as much money from people as we can?
Oh, the latter.
Well, then that's not generosity. That's being taken advantage of. That's just like being not smart.
Mm-hmm.
I would think, but don't look at me. I'm an old man, right? I'm from another generation. We tipped for service, right? And there was a way of showing gratitude and respect for someone who took pride in their job.
Right. I mean, I feel like that's not a thing anymore.
Then we need to use different. Again, we need to use different words then, because in my old man world, long gone. I remember the first time I went to a restaurant, and they had one of those, what do they call those little barcodes with the little squares in it or whatever? And they wanted me to scan the table in order to get my menu, right? Mm-hmm. And it just went downhill from there. It was bad. So don't ask me about that. I'm too old. All right? That's another world. I'm not from that world. Yeah. Mm. So again, you gotta think in this world too. People have to think and think for themselves and educate themselves. And what's happened is that we've denigrated education. We've denigrated the pursuit of information and knowledge and the development of oneself. And now it's okay for people to be complete mental slobs, and no one thinks twice about it. That's not good for a culture. It's the end of a culture, actually. I better stop going on my old man rants. Okay. But the thing is, my parents used to say the same thing, and my grandparents were horrified by the '60s. They were horrified by the '50s, right? So this keeps going until it's finally it reaches a climax, and then we revert to the mean. Another question, sir?
Okay, here's one. You posted a tweet a while back about the unknown, and I forget what it was exactly, but
The unknown and
anyways,
the
it got me.
unknowable, or was it just the unknown?
No, it's something. It got me thinking, but it's something about how
Oh, good. If it got you
being.
thinking, that's the purpose. Did you see? I tweeted. I asked Google, "What are the odds of being born human?" And it responds like 1 in 400 trillion. I just thought that was
Yeah,
hilarious. 1 in 400 trillion.
yeah,
Insane. I mean, people are going to like take that and say, "Oh, well, it must be 1 in 4," because they don't think. They don't think. Well,
yeah.
how? So go ahead. So something about the unknown.
Yeah, something about how being afraid of the unknown was just being attached to the known or something.
Oh yeah, 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 yeah. So yeah, what I said was that a lot of the people who believe in the simulation, who believe we're in a simulation, are afraid. They're not aware of this, but unconsciously they're afraid of the unknown.
Mm.
Now humans are all afraid of death, which is silly. But until they learn not to be afraid of death and why they don't need to be afraid of death, so it is. But the simulation guys, the guys who say, "Well, we've got it figured out. The world is a computer simulation."
Mm.
They're just trying to grab some kind of certainty because they can't deal with the dysphoria of uncertainty,
Mm-hmm.
and they're too bigoted in the technical sense of the word, or biased, or afraid of the opinions of others, or fearful of the unknown to explore those possibilities. So typically they tend to be atheists. They tend to be, pride themselves on their intellect, and so you can't talk about God, but you can talk about the simulation and still stay cool among this subset of hyper rationalists who are totally irrational. You see what I'm saying? And so
Mm-hmm.
the point was, and X is the place where these guys hang out, especially the guys. And if you say anything that smacks of religion or theism or truth with a capital T, these guys will ridicule you, or you'll
Mm-hmm.
go down in status, because we all know that with the Enlightenment we threw all of that out. That only now us rationalists, us people, there's a little hyperbole here, but I'm trying to make a point that the hyper rationalist, the man who uses only one tiny little sliver of reason, the one where you can add the numbers and get to or draw the equation and get to a consensus answer that everybody can agree on and everybody can feel secure because we all agree on this. Those men, and it's usually men, are actually afraid of the unknown, and that's why they don't approach any of these deeper metaphysical, philosophical, and theological questions with any seriousness at all.
Mm-hmm.
Until they get older, and then they get to be around 60, 70, 80, pushing, they're looking at the grave, and then all of a sudden they discover this life of the spirit. It's fascinating.
And is it because they're attached to these ideas that they know,
Well, yeah,
and
so they're attached to the ideas that they know, but they don't understand that the reason they cling so tightly to them is that they're afraid. Unconscious. I'm a shrink, right? Or I was a shrink. So we know about the unconscious fears that drive people, or the pre-conscious fears that drive people. We've worked with plenty of them. There's plenty of them that go nuts, right? And deep down
Mm-hmm.
inside, there's a fear of death.
Mm-hmm.
And if you live in a simulation, you don't have to worry about death.
Right. So I can feel
Now we
the
do.
fear of the
Now
unknown.
let me be more precise. Now we do live in a simulation, but it's not a computer simulation. It's a simulation orchestrated by the brain, practically speaking. But go ahead. Not
I was going to
orchestrated,
say,
transduced by.
I was going to say, say when I'm meditating, I can feel sometimes the fear of the unknown.
Yeah.
Um, but then I'm thinking about it, and like every night, you know, I go to sleep and I enter the unknown. I'm not why, how come I'm not afraid to go to sleep?
Good. Excellent. See, now see how you solve the problem using your own mind and your own experience and your own observations? You see that?
Yeah,
That's
but it
called
doesn't.
the
I mean, it
path. That's
doesn't.
called the path. That's called the path.
Hmm.
That's called contemplation. That's called solving problems by using your God-given capacities and what's right in front of you. So good.
Right. But I mean, I can think this and know it, but yet I'm still feel afraid of the unknown.
You're afraid of death, I bet. I bet. Well, keep going. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said anything. Keep going. Find out what you're afraid of, really.
Well, there's a feeling of being afraid of letting go of the body.
So that's
Right.
called, in most people would call that death.
I
I don't.
suppose,
It's not death.
but
It's not death, but it looks like death. That people imagine it's death, but
I can do it when, I mean, I told you last week I was like imagining myself as a bird, right? That would entail letting go. To fully immerse myself in that imagination, I'd have to let go of my body, right?
that would be terrific. Yeah, the second attention.
But that's not death.
No, it's not death, but it might be death of your human form.
Mm.
So keep pushing that. That's great. That's terrific. Yeah. Why do you confine yourself to your body? To me, it's an open question. Why do we do that?
Probably just one habit,
That's part of it.
and not knowing that you're more than your body. I think that's a big one.
That's the big one. And
But
also, it's
then
been
for me, right?
drilled into you over and over and over and over and over. You know, you've been captured, you've been domesticated, and this guy Juan Ruiz, got his hands on some good stuff. This surgeon from northern Mexico that wrote the Four Agreements. I recommend that to folks as an introduction to the Toltec cosmos.
Mhm.
It's got a lot to recommend it to the modern woman or man. Okay, is there anything else before we stop?
I was gonna comment on the fear of leaving the body. There's when I've been noticing it or paying attention to it, and there's also like a feeling. I think the way I can describe it is like a feeling of incoming bliss that I'm afraid of.
Yep. And it's bliss too. It's beyond bliss, but bliss is a good way to start talking about it. So you're afraid of bliss.
Yeah,
Isn't
it
that
seems like
amazing?
it.
Isn't that amazing? That's the ego trying to protect it, hanging on for dear life. I'll make you afraid of this.
Right.
But don't go to war. Understand. Go into a reconnaissance
Mm.
with your ego at this point. So can you see how the prescriptions have to be different for different people? If you're at that stage, then you need to understand, right? So good, because that's a great stage to be at, and that's progress.
And so, what do I do to understand that?
I don't know. Let's find out what you do. All right, sir?
Okay.
You've got a great brain.
Okay.
Okay, sir.
Thank you.
Keep the faith. Guard that mind. Ciao.